All right, so I'm going to do a podcast on how our communication has changed during the pandemic, verbally and non-verbally. And today we have Jackson, Carly, Patrick, Sadie. And yeah, so we're gonna go over some questions. I'm gonna give my answer and opinion first, and then you guys can answer the question yourself, make comments, or add anything interesting to the question. So, first question is, how have face masks impacted the way you interact and see other people during the pandemic? So, I think personally that I've had more trouble recognizing people, just acquaintances, just not close friends, but acquaintances. So I just I can just see their eyes, I can't see their mouth. So I just see half their face. And one thing I want to add is that there is actually some studies that found that with facial expressions, they had mistake facial expressions for another facial expression. What was really discussed was actually anger. So it just sometimes people face masks can they can confuse facial expressions. So that's what I think, and that's a study I found and actually studied in my communications class. So if you guys want to add anything. Nothing?
I agree.
You agree? Yeah.
I agree.
Great. All right. All right. Moving on to question number 2. Do you think face masks make some people more attractive, less attractive? Why?
I got more. Way more. Because it's like the hat thing.
Because you see less of them, so you just
Because
accept
they're
them
like
guess
eyes.
what's down.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's hard to recognize.
Yeah. I know. It's I think for some people, it makes them more attractive. I have one teacher who wears a face mask, and she looks really young when she has a face mask on. Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, sometimes. But for certain people, people with nice beards, it can make them less attractive, or just not show their awesome beard, Yeah. All right, so number 3. Did you have classes on Zoom? Was it better than in person? And how did the class behave on Zoom? So how was the class interaction and stuff? So personally, I'd say that when I took a Zoom class, I took one Zoom class in the fall of 2020, and the class was just silent. Nobody really ever interacted or said anything. I mean, there's the same 2 or 3 people that would respond to the questions, and the teacher is just man, everybody's so quiet today. But then in-person classes, people are just more engaging. They feel they need to talk more. Just, I don't know if it's the peer pressure of being in a classroom, seeing everybody. But one article I found is that students would fall behind due to distractions at home, because they're on a class at Zoom. So they didn't my teacher never forced anybody to show their face during a Zoom call. So they could just be doing whatever. They didn't even have to be paying attention to the lecture. So they were probably, at least for some people in the article, I found that the students were falling behind, their grades were slipping. And I think others enjoyed being at home, just being on a Zoom call, because they're in the comfort of their own home. They could wear their pajamas. I personally enjoyed it because I could just lay on my bed and just watch my Zoom class. And at least for some students, I think personally Zoom actually gave me more time to work on other stuff. I was in my room all day, so I was either working or just playing games on my phone. So I had so much time on my hands, so I could get more done. And I think personally, from my own experience, that Zoom actually even though I think in person's better and more effective, like I kind of enjoyed a lot of things about Zoom. Like, what do you guys think?
So for me, my senior year of high school, I had only 2 weeks of normal school, and the entire year was on Zoom. And I think Zoom classes aren't that good for people because like nobody there, not even teacher and students, like don't listen. And I didn't enjoy it because I had my final exam in the April and didn't have school for the whole year, so I was a bit stressed. But I think normal classes are way better.
Yeah, I agree. Anything? Anybody else want to add anything?
I would just like agree because like on Zoom, like you could do anything you want if you don't have to show your face. But if you show your face, I can have your camera on. There's like a lot more pressure, like you said, and feel like you need to look a certain way, sit up straight, be at a desk, like all that stuff.
Yeah. Alright. Did masks affect any of your five senses, like sight, smell, hearing, taste, touch? So my answer was I couldn't really smell as much like wearing a mask, like especially if it was like a thicker mask. I couldn't really smell anything. Like if I was in a grocery store, like I couldn't smell like the smell of like the fried chicken or whatever being cooked at the deli counter. And I understand some like people who wore glasses. I don't know if you were affected personally, but their glasses would fog up if their like mask was not like tight enough on their face, and like their like breath was like flowing up. So like yeah. Yeah. So it didn't really affect me that much, except for my sense of smell. But also like when people were talking, like I can't like I kind of read lips a little bit. I think everybody does. So like when people are talking, especially, like their voice was slightly muffled, but it was more of like not being able to like read their lips as much when they talk. So like that's how I felt about the mask affecting the senses. Like if anybody wants to share anything interesting.
But yeah, like sometimes like it was really hard to hear someone speak with a mask on, and you have to like ask them to like say it louder or like lower their mask, which some people like would not want to do. And being able to like have your not like if you have a big mask on, you can't really see below you and like, stuff like that.
Yeah,
So.
I still have the same thing that people don't hear me when I talk. And in the beginning, I didn't really like this mask, but now I don't care. Like, nobody can know.
Alright. So, fifth question is, were you ever quarantined? And what was your experience like being quarantined? So, I've been quarantined before. I had COVID, but I wasn't quarantined because of that. I was quarantined because I lived with a roommate who had it, and he was asymptomatic. So like being quarantined, I was only quarantined for 10 days. I think it was pretty boring, and it kind of sucked since I like literally couldn't leave my room or do anything. So basically like I would just spend all day like doing work or in my room all day. And like since like last year, you know how Ames like was either like takeout, or if you're like quarantined or whatever, they would deliver the food to you. So like I got my food delivered, and there's a couple times I like forgot to pick up my food, and it was like all cold and soggy. So that was like another downside of being quarantined. At least it was only 10 days though, so that was good. Like anybody else have an experience like being quarantined? Thoughts, feelings? Yep.
I had a quarantine, and it affected me very bad because we were on our way to like swim meet national championships, and we just got on a phone that we have quarantine because one of our coaches is COVID, and we just has to come back.
Oh, so you probably didn't have COVID, but like
I didn't have COVID, but I had quarantine.
In
Yeah.
close contact.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I was quarantined for. Yeah.
And it was only 10 days, so it wasn't that bad.
All right. So sixth question is, how often did you interact with people online and in person, like percentage wise? Like, so I'd say that about 70% of my interactions between like March 2020 and like early 2021 were online, obviously because of the pandemic and how things were last year. There's a lot more restrictions last year than they are now. So like I'd pretty much just be online all day, and if I wasn't online, like when the weather was nice, I would go to the football field and like do some workouts, like do workouts on the pull-up bars with Taras, and yeah. Any guys have any experience, or like what would you say, like based on like your experience, that how often were you like online interacting with friends, and how often were you in person during like the most like restrictive time for COVID measures?
So for me, I was online. I was only online since March 2020 to June 2020. But then like lockdown in Poland slowed down and it was like almost normal. But in September, started being the same. So we were online almost till June. So almost a year.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it was like pretty much, there were some in-person classes, but they're like mostly hybrids. Like, so what a hybrid is like you meet online most days, but then you have like 1 or 2 days a week where you meet in person. I didn't have any of those classes. Like pretty much both semesters were online for me. And actually, I'd want to pull up some research that I found. An article from Pew Research found that like people during the pandemic, like 81% of people talked with others through phone calls. Like they had some experience talking to people with phone calls that they normally would with in person. And then 68% of like normally in-person events and interactions were through online, obviously like classes and Zoom and stuff. And then like kids, like last year in a lot of states, kids would spend a lot more time like doing their classes on Zoom, so they weren't getting as good of a learning experience, especially like kids, like, you know, they're still like their brains are developing, they still have to like learn to interact and talk to other kids, and that's a big thing that like at least younger generations of kids are kind of lacking now because of them being on electronics and Zoom calls last year because of COVID. And so question 7 is anything you will miss from the early stages of the pandemic, like Zoom, just having a lot more free time since everything was like canceled, or
It was nice to have all that free time, but I think as like, since most of us are athletes, like something was like taken away from us right before COVID, like nationals and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's for the people who made nationals in 2020 that got canceled.
Yeah, so it's just like, it was nice to have all that downtime, but like,
Boring stuff.
it did get pretty boring, and people picked up hobbies and like video games and stuff.
And me personally, like, I'd probably that's the only thing I miss, is just having a lot of free time. But like, I'm not gonna miss anything about the pandemic. Like, and so my final question is, what have you learned from this pandemic? Like, what I've learned is that there was actually, I worked at Walmart in 2020, and I didn't even know about this until 2020, but there was actually like online shopping. Like they had like a whole department of people like that would, their only task would be to shop around the store and pick up groceries for people who didn't want to go in the store, either because of COVID or just because it's more convenient for them. So like they basically would pick out groceries, put them in a basket, like label them, and then once their customer like pulled up to like the parking lot, they would like hand them their groceries. So that was one thing. I don't know if this is probably for other stores too, but that was one thing interesting that I found from the pandemic, that there's actually online shopping, and I didn't even hear about that before 2020. But I mean, besides like the internet and like delivery stuff, but that's a different thing. And so transitioning from like normal life to the pandemic, it was kind of a shock. I was bored and I was kind of lonely since I have a small circle of friends, and I just really only interacted with those friends. I didn't interact with anybody else outside of those friends. And I definitely missed like parties, like going to movies, you know, like sports games, like bowling and stuff. So that was like, I'd rather like obviously not live in a pandemic, but that was just kind of what I've learned from this pandemic. Anybody learn anything or want to share anything they think they learned?
It's important to keep yourself healthy. That's the benefit of wearing face masks sometimes, because I feel like I got like less sick throughout the year because I was always having to wear one. But,
Any final thoughts? Anything? Yeah. All right. Well, that was it. That was it for this podcast. But so, I mean, it was very interesting, like hearing your guys' opinions and perspectives about COVID and stuff, and how like your interactions and communications have changed. So like, I didn't like. It was just kind of a shock for everybody, like a shock that we have to like do this online, learn how to like not interact with people as much. I mean, good thing we have technology. I don't know how we would have dealt with this if there wasn't like smartphones and like computers for like Zoom and Skype and stuff, you know. But anyway, I think that the pandemic, and specifically face masks and Zoom, has like taught us that we need to like have human interaction. Like, you need human interaction to like function, like to learn, to like do so many things that you kind of take for granted, you know. So that was something that a lot of people, and especially developing children, like I said earlier, like didn't have. So like it's changed everybody, like whether they know it or not, it's changed everybody. So I think that was my takeaway for this. Anybody has any takeaway for this whole thing, or any takeaways from the whole pandemic? No? All right. Anyway, stop recording. Yeah, cut this part out.